Let me get closer.
I'm Steve Checker. I know you are. Yes. Yeah, I would request everybody, if you don't mind, sit in the pews, and then we'll have plenty of time to look at the gravestones or the memorials and so forth. But I want to give an opportunity for John to talk, and I'll say a few words as well. But we're willing here now. That little map with you, that's going to help out a lot. But John Rogers, our friend here, will first talk for a little bit, and then we will. I'll talk for a few minutes as well. But definitely take it in. I remember my first time coming here. It was just me in this room, and then Paul and John came later in that. But it's something. So go ahead, John.
Are you ready?
Yes.
I've got a piece of paper here which I've written some notes on. It covers about 9,000 years, and I've got to do it in 15 minutes. So we'll jump the first few thousand, but I just want to say that when the Ice Age began to melt, the icebergs and lumps of ice went in such a rush that they divided us from the continent, and we became an island about 7,000 BC. And then the water, the frozen water on what became the island, started pouring down from the high places and making the rivers, which of course you all know. But this particular little place is on a bend in the river. It comes from Deben. It's called the Debenham, the River Debenham. The River Deben, it comes from a village called Debenham, and it goes down to Wickham Market and then Woodbridge. And the corner that we exist on, this parish, is also divided by roads, tracks. In fact, all roads in England were started by animals, and then hunters, and then farmers, settlers. And the people who emerged before we became an island and settled, got cut off here, were all nomadic. But they began to settle, and by about 600 BC, there were clearly marked groups, parishes. And the origin of the parishes is extraordinary. It's nothing to do with Christianity. 600 BC, we were very influenced and invaded by Teutons from Denmark. And they had a strong feeling that they had a very strong habit of making sure that the landowners of each little group should be responsible for finding a priest and supporting him and paying him. Well, not paying him, but sustaining him in the job of looking after the souls of the people who worked for him. And they were the only people who lived here, the people who worked on the land, and one of them was the leader and became the landlord. So that takes us up to the time that Jesus was born, and the life on this, the human life on this island was, roughly speaking, very like what can be found in Europe. at that time. They were groups of people who had taken to settling in areas and marking out the boundaries, and the boundaries were all marked by rivers and footpaths. There were no roads, and that's how this is one of them. In Suffolk, on the east, this part of England was completely covered with trees. And the trees we had growing here were called natives. And the definition of a native tree, there are 36 native trees in England still. And the native tree, the definition is that it was growing here at the time that we became an island. In other words, it was the whole of Europe, but when we got cut off, it's all we had. And so we have 36 varieties, like oak and ash and hornbeam, etc., thorn and Scots pine. There were a lot of Scots pine in this part, all the way up the east side. And so that's what the people beginning, who were early here, that's what they did. They lived in the woods, in the forests. There were wild animals. There were boar. I'm not sure if there were bear, but I was told there were bear, but I've got no proof. I believe there were. There certainly were on the continent. And then there were wolves and the lesser dogs or foxes and so on. And everything that exists today, more or less, in decreasing numbers, going down by pollution. But that was that. So then they traded, and the great deal of trading across Europe with the Celtic world, and from the east via Europe, and they also traded up from Portugal through the Gibraltar. Portugal, they were sea people who came really from Phoenicia originally, but later from all the coasts of the Mediterranean, and they traded and came up along the west coast of England, Wales, and in Ireland, and up to Scotland. And so there was a great deal that the west of England had to do with the eastern part of the Mediterranean. And there's a very strong feeling that the earliest form of Christianity came, the early innocent sort of the first 300 or 400 years, when it was complete chaos. The so-called Christian world was a whole series of different lots of people, and every lot had a different theory about who he had been, who Jesus had been. But with Jesus, with the influence of this man, Jesus of Nazareth, came some really deep, fundamental theories about life and how to live. And they were, for example, first of all, that the deepest one is that the summary of the Jewish belief about life, that you should, first of all, love God, and secondly, you should love your neighbour, and thirdly, you should love yourself. And you should make sure you love your neighbour at least as much as yourself, because we all naturally love each other, love ourselves, but if we can love our neighbour as much as that, then we'd be doing pretty well. And but above all, there should be a great reverence for the divine. And these people, that is the form of religion that came from this North Country rabbi, a travelling rabbi he was in Galilee in the north, and he taught that, how to live and how to love. And that was fundamentally what all Christian people started to do in the first 300 years. But it was chaos, because they totally disagreed. And of course, as they settled, the Celts, I mean the Jews and the Hebrews over there, and lots of other Arab groups among the Jews, they were just one Arab group. But they're unique because they kept a record, which the Old Testament is the bones of it. And that the Old Testament should be read not as a religious reader, but as someone who's interested in a rational, realistic person who's interested in anthropology and sociology and the development of man and human culture. It's immensely interesting because all the things that were going on in the Old Testament, including sacrifices, were going on in Europe anyway, among Celtic tribes. And they were, therefore, although the Celts wrote nothing, unfortunately, they had to, we have to make comparisons, and they are very similar in the two cultures. Anyway, then in the 381 AD, the Emperor of Rome decided he would stop beating up these nutcases going around loving each other, and decided instead to make it their religion. And it wasn't a religion, it was their law. And they made a creed about what people should believe, and unfortunately, because Theodosius II was the emperor in 381, he turned it into law. And it was sent out as a document, not as a creed, to all the provinces of the Roman Empire and turned it into a law. And if you didn't believe this, if you didn't agree with this, then his particular version that came out, then you were out. You weren't regarded as a full member of society. That was the way the Roman Emperor put it across Europe. So that's how it went. And using that formula, it produced this unbelievable concentration of cultural energy of the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages was the great flowering of that great culture that Rome spread around the world. And that was here. We had that. I have to look at dates because I'm absolutely hopeless at history. But it interests me immensely how you can see the thing coming through. This tiny little church here is one of the jewels, one of the precious jewels that was produced. And the thing is that when you look back at the origins of the small groups of people, the villages, the tribes that gradually formed, like Letheringham, I've lost. It says my brain suddenly goes blank. I'm so sorry. I'll pick it up.
You were talking about probably the origins of Letheringham during the Middle Ages and the small little church.
Oh yes. When you go back to BC and before the Christians, there was this extraordinary thing in this country of gatherings. They used to gather. I think I did say something about that. But they gathered, and they gathered in high places if they could. They didn't necessarily. They sometimes gathered in the bend of a river, which is here. They used to gather, I did tell you, for all sorts of reasons, but to be together. The people who were working, as they became settlers, they had to work on the land, and they had to fight against invading animals and tribes. But they used to meet together just to be together. And these were called gatherings. And the interesting thing is, this word gathering, in Aramaic, which is the name that the language that Jesus spoke, which is a Syrian language, it's a north country. He come from north. You see this Jesus, Nazareth, and the word gathering in there means church. Their word for gathering was a collection of people who came together just to be together, family, was the origin of the word church. And so really the origins of churches in this country is BC, because they had these gatherings, they met. And in this country, another thing that's unique, no, that's not unique, but one thing that is unique in England is a thing called henge. And henges were very primitive indeed, and we've discovered 300 of them in England, but there are many more to be found. And a henge is not found anywhere else in the world, and it is a circular trench. And it's again where people gathered. There weren't stones there like Stonehenge. That's a much later addition, and that needs different explanation. But a henge was in fact an observatory. They also lived there sometimes. They protected themselves inside this circle with palings, and to keep the enemy out. But on the whole, it was where you observed. That's why they were in on the whole, they were in high places. And they were also